In the desolate ruins of the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, where time has stood still since the catastrophic nuclear disaster, there lies a collection of inexplicable oddities that defy comprehension. From the unusual color of frogs to the haunting specter of abandoned vehicles, the area holds a treasure trove of the bizarre and the unexplained. But beyond the expected, there are truly extraordinary discoveries that push the boundaries of imagination. Join us as we embark on a journey through the weirdest things and encounters ever found within the confines of Chernobyl, where reality takes on a surreal and captivating form. Color-changing frogs. One of the most unusual effects of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster was the discovery of color-changing frogs that live near the abandoned city. These unique amphibians have skin that allows them to adapt their coloration to match their environment. Scientists first noticed this phenomenon in the 2000s when studying the wildlife thriving in the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. The frogs belong to the Rana temperaria species, commonly known as the common frog or moor frog, which is native to Eurasia. In normal populations, these frogs are generally brown or olive green in color. However, the frogs living near Chernobyl display a remarkable ability to alter their shades of gray, black, and green, depending on the surfaces they come into contact with. Researchers believe this is an evolutionary response that provides these frogs with excellent camouflage to evade predators and hide from threats. Studies on the frogs showed that their skin contains a special type of pigment cell called a chromatophore. These cells contain different colors of pigment that can expand or contract on command from the frog's nervous system. When the frog touches a light-colored surface like bark or leaves, the black pigment cells withdraw and the green or gray ones expand. On a dark surface, the process is reversed. This allows the frog to blend in with its surroundings within just a few minutes of changing locations. The color-changing ability gives the Chernobyl frogs an important advantage for survival in their post-disaster environment. With reduced competition from other species that couldn't adapt to the radiation, these frogs have thrived near the abandoned city. Their unique pigmentation shows how life finds a way to persist, even in places affected by nuclear catastrophe. While the long-term effects of radiation exposure on the frogs remain unclear, their discovery provided an amazing example of rapid evolution at work. The Babushka of Chernobyl. Deep in the irradiated forests surrounding the abandoned city of Chernobyl, a mysterious elderly woman is said to still live in isolation. She is known locally as Babushka, which means grandmother in Russian. Very little is definitively known about her, as she shuns all contact with outsiders who venture into the exclusion zone. Through the years, folklore has emerged among the rare trespassers who claim to have spotted Babushka from a distance in the woods. She is described as a small, hunched figure, wearing head-to-toe tattered dresses and shawls, even in the hottest summer weather. Some believe she may be in her 80s or 90s, though her age is impossible to verify. Babushka appears to survive entirely off the contaminated land, foraging for mushrooms, berries, and hunting small animals. It is thought that Babushka refused to evacuate with the other residents when the Chernobyl disaster occurred in 1986. Perhaps she had lived her whole life in the village of Kopachi near the power plant and could not bear to leave her homeland, despite the immense radiation levels that made it unsafe for humans. To this day, she remains stubbornly living off the grid in complete isolation deep in the forests that were once her village. While the sightings of Babushka are unconfirmed, locals who have searched for her say they have found signs that someone is surviving in the woods. Makeshift shelters, campfire ashes, animal traps fashioned from twigs and wire. If the mysterious Babushka does exist, she would be one of the longest living residents of the exclusion zone. Her incredible resilience in enduring decades exposed to radiation has made her a figure of fascination and speculation among those who study Chernobyl's legacy. Blackbird of Chernobyl. Another mystery unlocked in the Chernobyl is a mysterious large blackbird, which has been reportedly sighted by those who have ventured into the irradiated exclusion zone in Chernobyl. Very little is known about this elusive avian, which has become locally known as the Blackbird of Chernobyl. Eyewitnesses describe the blackbird as being significantly larger than a common crow or raven, with an immense wingspan of over 6 feet. Its feathers are said to be completely jet black with an oily sheen, and its eyes are described as an eerie glowing red. Due to high radiation levels, it is assumed that the Blackbird must have developed remarkable resistance to thrive in its radioactive home within the exclusion zone. The first purported sightings of the Blackbird date back to the early 2000s, but it remains very rarely seen. It is thought to mostly be nocturnal and nest deep within the most contaminated areas that have minimal human trespassing. Its calls are said to pierce the silence of the abandoned city, a low, guttural croak that instills a sense of unease in those who hear it. While some scientists are skeptical that a new avian species could have evolved in Chernobyl without prior documentation, the multiple independent sightings over the years lend credibility to the Blackbird's existence. Its jet black coloration may serve as camouflage amid the decaying reactor buildings and could help it absorb heat. With no other large blackbirds native to the region, its origins within the most radioactive patch of forest on Earth remain an intriguing mystery. Radiation-eating black fungi. Within the contaminated forests and buildings of the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, an unusual type of black fungus has been observed to thrive off the high levels of radiation left over from the 1986 nuclear disaster. Known unofficially as radiation-eating fungi, these black molds have developed an incredible ability to break down radioactive isotopes in the environment. Scientists first discovered the fungi growing in abundance on the walls and floors inside the abandoned reactor buildings at Chernobyl, which experienced some of the highest radiation doses on the planet. Through extensive study, they found that the fungi were metabolizing and absorbing radioactive elements like uranium, plutonium, and americium directly from the irradiated materials like concrete. Rather than being killed off by radiation exposure, the fungi appear to have adapted to use it as an energy source for growth. The radiation-eating fungi form dense black colonies consisting of an interwoven network of filaments known as hyphae. They secrete powerful enzymes and acids that allow them to break the radioactive elements down into organic compounds they can assimilate. In this way, the fungi are helping to slowly decontaminate their surroundings over time by removing these dangerous and long-lived radioactive isotopes from the ecosystem. While still not fully understood, the discovery of these unique black molds demonstrates the incredible resilience and adaptability of life. Through evolution in Chernobyl's extreme environment, the fungi have managed to not just survive, but actually thrive thanks to their novel ability to metabolize radiation. Their discovery could potentially provide insights into bioremediation applications for other nuclear sites around the world. The Red Forest. One of the most haunting sights within the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone is the massive swath of reddish-brown pine trees known as the Red Forest. Located just a few kilometers from the ruined nuclear power plant, the Red Forest earned its name due to the peculiar discoloration that overtook its trees after the 1986 disaster. In the aftermath of the explosion, the Red Forest absorbed massive amounts of radioactive fallout from the plume. Pines closer to the plant were burned to a crisp by the extreme heat of the blast, but further in, the trees took on a strange reddish hue as their needles were contaminated by radioactive isotopes like cesium-137. The particles lodged in the trees, killing many and permanently staining others. To this day, the eerie reddish tint remains as a reminder of the radiation that polluted every inch of the forest. Stepping foot into the Red Forest, one is met with a post-apocalyptic landscape of brittle, discolored trees standing like sentinels amid the silence. Their branches are bare, as the contamination killed most of the forest's wildlife. Despite being declared a dead zone unsuitable for plant or animal life after 1986, researchers have recently found signs of tentative recovery in the Red Forest. Moss and fungus have returned to the trees, and small birds and rodents have been spotted amongst the reddish trunks once more. Slowly, imperceptibly, nature is reclaiming the area through adaptation and resilience in the face of nuclear disaster. The reddish ghosts of the forest stand as a testament to the lasting impacts of radiation on the environment. Hundreds of gas masks. In various abandoned buildings and metro tunnels of the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone lies an unsettling discovery. hundreds upon hundreds of gas masks left behind in the wake of the 1987 nuclear disaster. Over the decades, urban explorers and scientists have happened upon vast stashes of the relic protective gear, offering a glimpse into the frantic emergency response efforts of the time. In one underground room off a decrepit metro station, an estimated 500 gas masks were found haphazardly piled on shelves and benches. Layers of dust and cobwebs covered the pale rubber faces, as if they had been hastily discarded and forgotten in the panic. Elsewhere, entire hallways were lined from wall to wall with gas masks, as though workers had peeled them off en masse, never to return for them. It's believed these masks were intended for the thousands of liquidators drafted to help contain the radioactive fallout in those critical initial months. But with radiation levels spiraling out of control, the masks were likely ineffective against the invisible poison in the air. With contamination readings off the charts even miles from reactor number 4, evacuation became the only viable option for survival. Today, the eerie stockpiles of gas masks stand as ghostly mementos of desperate times. Their numbers serve as a reminder of just how many workers were conscripted as part of the desperate firefighting and cleanup efforts, risking their lives in an environment far beyond the capabilities of any protective equipment from that era. The masks are tangible artifacts of the sacrifices made during the initial chaos of the Chernobyl disaster. Atomic vodka. Atomic vodka is a unique spirit that has gained international attention due to its connection to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Atomic vodka is the brainchild of a team of researchers led by Professor Jim Smith from the University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom. Their goal was to create a product that would showcase the potential for the region's recovery and challenge the perception of the area as a wasteland. The researchers carefully selected grains and water from the exclusion zone around Chernobyl, which is still heavily contaminated. They collaborated with a distillery in Ukraine to produce the vodka, implementing a unique distillation process that removed impurities, including radioactive isotopes. Extensive testing conducted by independent laboratories has demonstrated that atomic vodka is safe for human consumption and falls within the normal limits for radioactivity. The distillation process successfully reduces the radioactive contaminants to levels lower than those found in many other food and drink products worldwide. The creation of atomic vodka has broader aims beyond offering consumers a unique experience. The team behind the project intends to use a significant portion of the proceeds from vodka sales to support communities affected by the Chernobyl disaster. Their efforts include funding local projects and initiatives focused on environmental monitoring, wildlife conservation, and sustainable agriculture in the region. Atomic vodka has received both praise and criticism. Some argue that any product associated with a nuclear disaster is in poor taste. However, proponents argue that atomic vodka symbolizes resilience, innovation, and hope for the affected communities. Deformed form animal. In the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster, the release of radioactive contaminants had adverse effects on the natural environment and the animals. The radiation levels in the affected area led to genetic mutations and abnormalities in plants and animals. Some of these deformities included physical malformations, altered reproductive abilities, and compromised overall health in various species. The farm animals in the vicinity of Chernobyl were also affected by the disaster. Many livestock, including cows, sheep, and pigs, experienced an increased risk of congenital abnormalities and deformities. These deformities ranged from limb malformations and organ defects to neurological disorders and impaired growth. The exposure to radioactive materials in the environment contributed to these adverse effects on the animals' development and health. The link between deformed farm animals and the Chernobyl disaster highlights the far-reaching impact of nuclear accidents on ecosystems and agricultural practices. It serves as a grim reminder of the long-term consequences of such events, extending beyond human health and safety. Efforts have been made to monitor and study the effects of radiation on the animals in the Chernobyl region. Researchers have documented and analyzed the occurrence of deformities in farm animals and wildlife, contributing to our understanding of the long-term impacts of nuclear accidents on ecosystems. Furthermore, initiatives have been launched to support the affected communities and mitigate the repercussions of the disaster. These efforts include providing assistance to farmers, implementing food safety measures, and conducting ongoing research to assess the environmental and health risks associated with the Chernobyl disaster. The Stalkers of Chernobyl. The term Stalkers of Chernobyl refers to individuals who illegally enter and explore the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, a highly radioactive area surrounding the site of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. These individuals, often referred to as urban explorers or adventurers, venture into the restricted zone to satisfy their curiosity, document the abandoned structures, and experience the eerie atmosphere of the post-apocalyptic landscape. The Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, established shortly after the 1986 disaster, covers an area of approximately 2,600 square kilometers and is strictly regulated by authorities due to the ongoing radiation risks. Entry into the zone is generally prohibited without proper authorization, as it poses significant health hazards. Despite the dangers and legal consequences, some individuals are drawn to the allure of exploring this forbidden territory. The motivations for becoming a stalker of Chernobyl can vary. Some seek adrenaline-fueled adventures and the thrill of exploring restricted areas. Others are attracted to the historical and cultural significance of Chernobyl, wishing to witness firsthand the aftermath of the disaster and document the effects of abandonment on the surrounding towns and infrastructure. It's important to note that entering the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone without proper authorization is illegal and unsafe. The area remains highly contaminated with radiation, and exposure to radioactive materials can have severe health consequences, including an increased risk of cancer and other illnesses. Authorities responsible for managing the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone take measures to prevent unauthorized entry. They conduct regular patrols, maintain a security presence, and have implemented strict control measures to deter trespassers. Violators caught inside the zone can face legal consequences, including fines and even imprisonment. It is essential to prioritize safety and respect the regulations in place to protect both personal well-being and the preservation of the site. For those interested in learning about the Chernobyl disaster and its aftermath, organized and authorized tours are available, allowing visitors to experience the area under the guidance of trained professionals who ensure safety protocols are followed. Altered genes in dogs. Now this story shocked the world. This is also one of the things scientists discovered in the Chernobyl forest: altered genes in dogs. Regarding the connection between genetic alterations in dogs and Chernobyl, it's important to note that the primary impact of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster was on the human population and the environment surrounding the affected area. However, there have been indirect effects on the animal population, including dogs, due to the radioactive contamination. After the Chernobyl disaster, the evacuation of human inhabitants from the surrounding areas resulted in abandoned settlements. As a result, many domesticated animals, including dogs, were left behind and had to adapt to the new environment, which included radiation exposure. The exposure to radiation in the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone can lead to various health effects in animals, including genetic mutations. Over time, these mutations can contribute to changes in the genetic makeup of the affected animal populations. While specific studies on genetic alterations in dogs in the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone are limited, broader studies on wildlife in the area have indicated increased genetic variability and the potential for genetic alterations due to radiation exposure. These alterations can manifest as changes in physical appearance, reproductive abilities, or susceptibility to diseases. It's important to note that genetic alterations resulting from radiation exposure are typically considered detrimental, as they can lead to health issues or reduced fitness in affected animals. However, the long-term consequences of genetic alterations in dogs, specifically within the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, are not extensively studied or well documented. Overall, while the Chernobyl disaster has had a significant impact on the environment and wildlife, including dogs in the affected areas, the specific relationship between genetic alteration in dogs and Chernobyl is complex and requires further scientific investigation. The primary focus of research and efforts in the region has been on understanding the effects of radiation on ecosystems, rather than specifically on genetic alterations in domesticated animals like dogs. A massive sarcophagus. A massive sarcophagus is a term often used to describe the structure known as the Chernobyl shelter, or the Chernobyl nuclear power plant sarcophagus. It was constructed to enclose the damaged reactor unit following the catastrophic Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. After the explosion and subsequent fire at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant's Reactor 4, a makeshift concrete structure, called the Chernobyl shelter, or object shelter, was hastily constructed to cover the damaged reactor. This initial shelter, known as the sarcophagus, was built to limit the release of radioactive materials into the environment and provide some containment of the radioactive debris. However, it was only intended as a temporary solution and had several limitations. Due to concerns about the structural integrity of the original sarcophagus and the ongoing risk of radioactive contamination, an international effort was undertaken to construct a more robust and long-term solution. This led to the development of the new safe confinement, or the Chernobyl Shelter Implementation Plan. The new safe confinement is an enormous structure designed to enclose the damaged reactor unit entirely. It is a massive, arch-shaped construction spanning 257 meters wide, 162 meters long, and 108 meters tall. It was built adjacent to the damaged reactor and then slid into place using a system of hydraulic jacks. The NSC is constructed with a combination of steel and concrete, and its purpose is to provide a secure and environmentally controlled enclosure for the damaged reactor. The structure is designed to prevent the release of radioactive materials into the environment and protect workers involved in the decommissioning and cleanup efforts at the site. Completed in 2016, the new safety confinement is a significant engineering achievement and represents a crucial step in the ongoing efforts to secure and remediate the Chernobyl nuclear site. It provides a more stable and long-lasting solution compared to the original sarcophagus, ensuring the safe management of the damaged reactor and reducing the risk of further environmental contamination. The Chernobyl shelter and the subsequent construction of the new safe confinement serve as a reminder of the consequences of nuclear disasters and the ongoing efforts required to mitigate their impact and ensure the safety of affected areas. Now, it's time for today's subscriber pick. At sundown deep within the eerie depths of the post-apocalyptic Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, sighting of a mysterious creature was captured. Whispers circulate about a fox-like creature with a huge tail probably mutated. Locals speak of this mysterious being with fiery dark fur, probably with piercing green eyes, and an otherworldly grace that navigates the desolate landscape. It moves silently through the overgrown ruins and sometimes snow during the winter period, its presence both captivating and haunting. Some claim it possesses an ethereal glow, as if touched by the lingering radiation. Legends intertwine, suggesting it is a guardian spirit, an embodiment of the resilient wilderness reclaiming its domain. Yet its true nature remains an enigma, a symbol of the enduring and untamed spirit amidst the scars of the Chernobyl disaster. This story truly shocked the world. This is just one of the things scientists discovered in the Chernobyl forest. Tell us in the comments section, what do you think about this picture? The firefighters. The firefighters who responded to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986 played a crucial role in the initial response and containment efforts. They were the first responders on the scene after the explosion and worked under extremely dangerous conditions to extinguish the fires and prevent further damage to the reactor. When the explosion occurred at Reactor 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant on April 26, 1986, it caused a massive fire that released a significant amount of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The firefighters, along with plant workers and other emergency personnel, were called upon to contain the situation and prevent the spread of the fire. The firefighters faced numerous challenges during their response. They were not initially aware of the full extent of the radiation exposure and the dangers they were facing. They worked in close proximity to the damaged reactor, where radiation levels were extremely high. They battled the fires for hours, using water and other extinguishing agents, and worked to stabilize the situation as best they could. Tragically, many of the firefighters who responded to the Chernobyl disaster suffered severe radiation exposure. Some were not adequately protected, as the full extent of the dangers was not initially understood. The immediate effects of radiation sickness, such as nausea, vomiting, and burns, were evident in some of the firefighters shortly after the incident. However, the long-term health consequences resulting from the radiation exposure became apparent in the years and decades that followed. Many of the firefighters and other emergency responders experienced significant health issues, including radiation-related illnesses and an increased risk of cancer. The firefighters of Chernobyl demonstrated great courage and selflessness in their response to the disaster. Their actions were instrumental in preventing the situation from escalating further and containing the immediate threat. Their sacrifice and dedication continue to be recognized and commemorated as part of the broader remembrance of the Chernobyl disaster. It's important to acknowledge the bravery and sacrifice of the firefighters and emergency responders, while also recognizing the need for ongoing support and care for those who were affected by the long-term health consequences of their exposure to radiation during the Chernobyl disaster. Dolls of Chernobyl. When footage of the Chernobyl emerged, there were sightings of dolls. These dolls are handcrafted dolls that are often made by local artisans or residents in the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone or nearby areas. They have gained attention as unique symbols of the Chernobyl disaster and the resilience of the affected communities. The creation of Chernobyl dolls began after the nuclear disaster as a way for local artists and craftspeople to express their experiences and emotions surrounding the tragedy. These handmade dolls typically depict elderly women, known as babushkas in Russian, wearing traditional clothing. The dolls often incorporate elements related to the Chernobyl disaster, such as gas masks or radiation symbols. Chernobyl dolls hold symbolic meaning for many individuals, representing the strength and endurance of the people living in the affected areas. They serve as reminders of the human impact of the disaster and the ongoing struggles faced by the communities affected by the nuclear accident. Abandoned Cooling Tower. The abandoned cooling tower of Chernobyl is the cooling tower that was intended to be part of the unfinished fifth reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The cooling tower, located near the power plant in Pripyat, Ukraine, remains one of the prominent visual reminders of the Chernobyl disaster. The cooling tower was designed to assist in the cooling process of the fifth reactor, which was still under construction at the time of the nuclear accident in 1986. However, after the disaster, the construction of the fifth reactor was permanently halted, and the cooling tower was left incomplete. The tower stands as a stark and haunting structure, representing the abrupt halt to the construction plans and the lasting impact of the Chernobyl accident. The cooling tower's distinctive shape, with its concrete structure and large cylindrical form, has attracted the interest of visitors and photographers, making it an iconic symbol of the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. Over the years, the tower has been subject to natural decay and weathering, further adding to its eerie and desolate appearance. Note that the cooling tower itself does not pose a significant radiation risk. The primary sources of radioactive contamination in the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone are the remains of the damaged reactor and its surroundings. The cooling tower and other structures within the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone serve as reminders of the human and environmental impact of the Chernobyl disaster. They also attract visitors who are interested in exploring and understanding the history and aftermath of the nuclear accident. Silhouettes of missing people. Apart from the sightings of dolls on the streets of Chernobyl, shadow-looking drawings are found in specific areas of the streets. Following the Chernobyl accident, numerous people were affected, including plant workers, emergency responders, and local residents. Some individuals lost their lives, while others were injured or displaced. In the aftermath, families and communities faced the anguish of missing loved ones, as some individuals were unable to be accounted for, or went missing due to the chaotic circumstances surrounding the disaster. The silhouettes are pitch-black drawings on the wall in the streets representing the missing individuals, have been used in various commemorative efforts related to Chernobyl. These silhouettes serve as a poignant reminder of the human toll of the disaster and the individuals who remain unaccounted for. They are often displayed at memorial sites, exhibitions, or events dedicated to raising awareness about the Chernobyl tragedy. By showcasing the silhouettes of missing people, these memorial missing tributes aim to honor their memory, provide solace and support to their families, and emphasize the ongoing need for remembrance and justice. They also serve as a reminder of the long-term consequences of the Chernobyl disaster on communities and the importance of recognizing and addressing the human impact of nuclear accidents. Graveyards of vehicles. After the disaster, contaminated vehicles, including cars, buses, trucks, and other machinery, were used to transport people away from the affected areas. These vehicles became contaminated with radioactive particles, posing a risk of spreading radiation to other areas. As a result, they were deemed too hazardous for regular use and were left abandoned in designated areas within the exclusion zone. These vehicle graveyards can be found in various locations within the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. They serve as a visual reminder of the scale and urgency of the evacuation efforts and the lasting impact of the disaster on the affected communities. It's worth noting that access to these vehicle graveyards may be restricted or limited due to safety concerns. The radiation levels in some areas of the exclusion zone can still pose risks to human health, and visitors are required to comply with safety regulations and obtain proper authorization before entering the zone. The vehicle graveyards, along with other abandoned structures and remnants within the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, contribute to the unique and haunting atmosphere of the area, attracting visitors interested in the history and aftermath of the nuclear disaster. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.